When we hear the word Chernobyl, our minds usually jump to the melted reactor, the ghost city of Pripyat, the human tragedy. But there's this whole other story, a really heartbreaking one that's almost never told. It's about the victims that nobody ever bothered to count, the pets that were left behind. This isn't from a movie. This was a real, actual, handwritten note pinned to an apartment door in Pripyat back in 1986. And these few simple words, they open up a story of misplaced hope and just unimaginable heartbreak.
So this one simple note, it's like a key unlocking a part of the disaster that you won't find in any of the official reports. It kind of stands in for every single family, every pet, and every impossible choice that had to be made in the middle of that crisis.
What's so crushing about this note is what it tells us. This was never meant to be a final goodbye. The family who wrote it, they really truly believed they were coming back. They left out food and water and this desperate plea, just hoping it would be enough to protect their dog for a few days. Okay, so picture the scene. It is absolute chaos. It's April 27th, a full 36 hours after the explosion, and the evacuation order has finally come down for the 50,000 people living in Pripyat. The whole thing was built on this one crucial lie. 3 days, that's what everyone was told. It's just a precaution, the authorities said. Just pack the essentials, you'll be back home before you know it. And that single promise led so many people to make a decision that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. I mean, this is what a life looks like when it's just paused. People left their homes like they were just popping out to the shops for a bit. Dishes still in the sink, TVs left on, photos still sitting on the shelves. And because you don't pack up your entire life for a 3-day trip, they left their pets. They left them with food and water, thinking, okay, we'll see you on Wednesday. But the animals, they seemed to know something was deeply wrong. This account from a survivor is just gut-wrenching. It describes dogs howling, desperately trying to get on the buses with their families, only to be shoved back by soldiers. They chased those buses for as long as they could, just not understanding why they were being abandoned. So, as the last of the buses pulled away, a new, grim problem was just beginning for the Soviet authorities. You now had thousands of abandoned animals roaming a highly radioactive city, and they were seen as a serious threat. See, the problem was their fur. The animals were basically hot. They'd absorbed all these radioactive particles from the air, the water, the ground, and that made them walking, mobile sources of radiation that could just wander right out of the newly formed exclusion zone. From a cold scientific point of view, the logic was pretty clear. And the solution they came up with was just as cold and clear. Soviet soldiers were given a single terrible order. Go back into that abandoned city and eliminate every single animal you can find. Not just strays on the street, but the family pets waiting faithfully inside their homes. And here's the most tragic part of all. When the soldiers entered that silent city, they were greeted by happy barks. I mean, after days of being totally alone, the pets were just overjoyed to see people again. They came running toward the sounds of human voices, toward the soldiers, thinking they were finally being rescued. Just try to imagine that for a second. On one side, you have the pure, unconditional trust of an animal, wagging its tail, so happy to see a person. And on the other, you have a young man with a rifle, following an order he absolutely could not refuse. It's just an impossible, heartbreaking situation. And it's so important to remember who these soldiers were. They weren't monsters. For the most part, they were just young kids, conscripts, drafted into service, who were handed a mission that none of them could have ever imagined. For a lot of them, refusing that order just wasn't an option. But, and this is a really big but, the story doesn't end there in tragedy. Against all the odds, some of the animals survived. They hid. They ran. They just got lucky. And their story now turns from one of pure tragedy to one of incredible, mind-blowing resilience. For nearly 15 generations, the direct descendants of the pets of Pripyat have continued to live and breed inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone. They are a living, breathing link to the families that were forced to leave all those years ago. Now, their lives are incredibly hard. There's no question. They face these brutal winters, predators like wolves, and of course, the constant, invisible threat of radiation. But there is a little sliver of kindness in their story. The workers who still maintain the power plant, they look out for them. They share their food and give them shelter when they can. And here's where the story takes another amazing turn. These survivor dogs, they're now scientifically priceless. By studying their unique genetics, scientists are hoping to finally understand how life manages to adapt to long-term exposure to high levels of radiation. In the last few years, their incredible story has started to attract help from the outside world. A nonprofit called the Clean Futures Fund has started going in to provide veterinary care. They spay, neuter, and vaccinate the dogs, just trying to make their short, tough lives a little bit better. And then in 2018, something truly hopeful happened. A real milestone. After a long process of decontamination, 36 puppies were officially given permission to leave the zone, the very first dogs to be allowed out in 32 years. They were adopted by families in the US and Canada, and, well, they finally got to go home. And so that brings us right back to where we started, to that simple note, a desperate plea from a family who never got to come back. We'll never know what actually happened to the real Zhulka, but it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are some of those incredibly resilient dogs still living in the shadow of that reactor today? Her descendants? Still waiting? And somehow still surviving?